As promised, for more on the political fallout here in the U.S., let's turn to our own political analyst, Richard Wolff, the author of Renegade, The Making of a President. Richard, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
All right. The president again today stressed that the U.S. is not meddling, but his State Department got Twitter to delay maintenance on its server until most of Iran would be asleep. What would this be, quiet meddling?
Well, they neither want to be entirely quiet, and they obviously don't want to be seen to be meddling, but they are actually intervening in one way or another beyond the sort of marginal stuff about Twitter. And these new technology, as Richard Engel rightly pointed out, have been incredibly important to the reform movement. But beyond that, the most important weapon, tool, if you will, that the president has is what he says. And here the White House is treading this incredibly difficult and fine line between making a statement of moral authority about obviously being pro-democracy and wanting to encourage the people who support the reform movements, and yet, on the other hand, not wanting to taint the reformists by suggesting or playing into the reactionary crowd's hands of looking like the reformers are a tool of American power. So this is incredibly difficult, but the real meddling, the stuff that isn't so quiet, is what comes out of the president's mouth. That's where the White House has been focusing its attention.
All right, to that point, and then a little bit more later about the question of what we might be doing to facilitate communications there. The caution today from the president that there is not that much of a difference from a U.S. foreign policy perspective between Mousavi and Ahmadinejad. What was that about?
Well, that's really about the supreme leader. In the end, the national security analysis here is that the nuclear program, because that's really what we're talking about, as well as obviously support for terrorist groups, but especially the nuclear program, is in the hands of the supreme leader. And whoever the elected president is, that nuclear program will proceed along its own track. So, yes, there are real differences between the reform movement and the forces behind Ahmadinejad. Mm-hmm. But in terms of what America really wants out of this, of course, greater trade, greater openness in Iran is important, but first and foremost, the nuclear program, they don't ultimately think the calculation is going to change either way.
Senator McCain suggested this morning that the Iranian people, as he put it, should not be subjected to 4 more years of Ahmadinejad. Has there been any, first off, what is the political split on this? Is there really a sizable reaction, even in the Republican Party, that we should somehow be doing more about Iran? And has anybody suggested what it is we could do about Iran without looking like we were deliberately pushing it one way or the other?
Well, the tough talk feels good, and the Republicans have been engaging it for many years. But there was this thing called the Bush administration, and there was this thing called the axis of evil. They tried it. What was the end result? Iran has thousands of centrifuges enriching uranium, and North Korea, another part of the axis of evil, now has 8 to 12 nuclear weapons. So, you know, they tried that path, and it's great going on TV talking like that, but what's the end result? If you really care about the end result in Iran, that approach has not left many options either for people in the region or for the policymakers in Washington.
All right, you just heard Richard Engel say, using his own expertise, he has no idea how this is going to turn out. I'm not going to ask you to offer a prediction. I would presume it would be rather similar. But what is going forward? What is this country's role going to be in how it turns out? Are we simply essentially an IT department to make sure that the communications stay open from people inside that country?
You know, in any country, some of the most corrosive factors can be American or any outside government trying to interfere with an election. In the end, the election is a means to an end. What matters is building closer relationships with the Iranian people, better trade, and getting world opinion to counter this nuclear program. Yes, it would be nice to have a favorable president in place, but those policies have to go on anyway.
Richard Wolff of MSNBC, author of the new book Renegade. As always, great thanks, Richard. Have a good night.
Thank you, Keith.